this warning from the CEO of the nation's largest automaker, General Motors, about the impact of the tariffs on the car industry.
Well, when we look at the overall $4 to $5 billion impact from tariffs that we shared.
You ever wonder what happens when a giant like General Motors, one of the largest car manufacturers in the world, gets hit by political forces that they can't control? Right now, GM is facing a crisis unlike any they've experienced before, and it's all because of one thing: tariffs. These tariffs, first introduced by former President Trump's administration, have been silently but steadily crippling GM's ability to produce cars. In fact, GM's CEO has warned that these tariffs could cost the company up to $5 billion this year. Let that sink in. $5 billion. That's a staggering amount for a company that was already grappling with rising costs and a strained supply chain. But it doesn't stop there. On May 29, 2025, workers across the U.S. showed up to their jobs at GM only to be told that their production lines would be halted indefinitely. No strike, no protest. Just a quiet, shocking announcement from GM headquarters. And this wasn't just a small disruption, it was the beginning of a series of shutdowns that have sent shockwaves through the entire industry. Why is this happening? The reason is a perfect storm of rising costs, missing parts, and weakening consumer demand, all made worse by the political chaos surrounding trade policies. GM's problems stem from the 25% tariffs slapped on steel, aluminum, and semiconductors.
If you don't have steel, you don't have a country. You don't have a country.
Key components in vehicle production. Some parts, particularly those from China, have nearly doubled in price. And for a company that relies on these materials to build everything from trucks to electric vehicles, the cost increases are unsustainable. By May 1st, GM had already revised its financial outlook, warning that these tariffs could result in a $4 to $5 billion loss this year. That's $5 billion that could have been invested in the company's future, including their ambitious push for an all-electric future by 2035. Instead, GM's U.S. production has come to a halt, and workers are left without answers. This crisis is already rippling across the U.S. and even to Mexico, where parts suppliers are facing similar pressures. In Michigan, a diner near a GM plant saw a 40% drop in breakfast traffic as the factory slowed down, while a logistics company in Kentucky canceled driver hires due to reduced demand. And it's not just GM. Ford and Stellantis have seen their stocks drop as well, while Wall Street analysts adjust their forecasts, predicting a potential contraction in the auto industry as a whole. So what happens when even the biggest companies in the world, like GM, are left floundering under the weight of unpredictable policies and shifting trade wars? We're about to find out. These figures were shared with shareholders in a letter marking a troubling shift in the company's operations. The news didn't come with a press conference, but instead was announced quietly. On May 29, 2025, workers arrived at GM factories across the U.S., only to be told that production lines would be halted indefinitely. There was no strike, no protest, just a stunning announcement from the GM headquarters marking the beginning of a series of closures. The reason? A perfect storm of rising costs, missing parts, and collapsing demand, compounded by political chaos. The fallout from this decision has rippled from Detroit to Mexico, Capitol Hill to Wall Street, with former President Donald Trump standing firm on his trade policies. The origin of this crisis can be traced back to the tariffs imposed by Trump's administration. Over the past several months, the government raised duties on nearly every component GM needs to build vehicles, from steel and aluminum to semiconductors and brake systems. These tariffs added up to 25% more to the price of parts, and for some categories like those sourced from China, costs nearly doubled. Initially, GM tried to absorb the added expenses by adjusting its operations, shifting contracts, and moving some production in-house. But by May 1st, the company revised its financial outlook, warning that these tariffs could lead to a $4 to $5 billion loss this year. This news was followed by a series of shutdowns. On May 8th, GM idled its Ontario electric van plant, laying off 500 workers. Just days later, production of the Hummer EV and Silverado electric pickup were paused at the Detroit factory. Another 200 workers were let go. And then the big blow. GM's U.S. production came to a standstill. The company simply could not produce vehicles fast or cheaply enough under the current circumstances, with rising costs, parts shortages, and weakening consumer demand. The shutdown affects thousands of workers and has a ripple effect through supply chains, parts manufacturers, and dealerships. For the auto industry, this is more than just a setback. It's a shockwave. GM, once bailed out by the federal government and now aiming for an all-electric future by 2035, has been forced to pause its operations due to a policy environment it can no longer navigate. Meanwhile, Trump's response to the shutdown was calm and direct. In a Pennsylvania rally, when asked about the GM situation, he remarked, "I don't like what they did. We've supported these companies, but they made their choices." He didn't rage or offer relief. Instead, he emphasized that GM's failure to adapt to tariffs was their issue, not his administration's. The reaction on Wall Street was swift. GM's stock dropped 5%, followed by Ford and Stellantis. Analysts rushed to adjust their forecasts, some predicting that this could mark the beginning of an era of auto industry contraction. The effects are already visible in various parts of the U.S. In Michigan, a diner near a GM facility saw a 40% drop in breakfast traffic. In Kentucky, a logistics company canceled driver hires. Workers in Tennessee and Indiana are anxiously awaiting the next steps, uncertain about the future. As the political battle over blame rages on, GM insists it's responding to tariffs and policies that make it harder to operate, while unions argue that workers are paying the price. Consumers, meanwhile, face fewer cars, higher prices, and longer waits. This crisis is more than just an economic setback. It's a psychological blow, showing how even the biggest companies can falter when faced with unpredictable policy shifts. The machines are quiet, the production lines are still, and workers are left wondering when, if ever, the assembly line will start again.
Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget like and subscribe for the latest updates on global politics.